Now for today's program. Richard Michelson is a poet and an award-winning author. His children's books have been named among the 10 best of the year by the New York Times, Publishers Weekly, and the New Yorker, and among the best dozen of the decade by Amazon.com. Rich has received a National Jewish Book Award, two Sidney Taylor Gold Medals from the Association of Jewish Libraries, and the Samuel Minot Jones Award for Lifetime Literary Achievement, as well as a whole host of other awards and medals, though too numerous to mention them all. Rich served 2 terms as Poet Laureate of Northampton, Massachusetts, where he hosts Northampton Poetry Radio, and his poetry has appeared in many publications, including Moment Magazine. Rich wrote the libretto for the music theater piece Dear Edvard, Munch and His Muses, which has its world premiere this summer at Martha's Vineyard Playhouse. Amy E. Schwartz is Moment Magazine's opinion and books editor, as well as editor of the magazine's popular Ask the Rabbi section, and she's won first place in commentary from the Religion News Association. Before coming to Moment, Amy was a longtime editorial writer and op-ed columnist at the Washington Post, where she was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in commentary. Amy is president of the Non-Denominational Jewish Studies Center in Washington, D.C., and is the editor of the book Can Robots Be Jewish? And Other Pressing Questions of Modern Life. Please welcome Richard Michelson and Amy E. Schwartz.
Thanks, Suzanne. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to you, Rich.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. Glad to speak to you. Always glad to talk to you. Welcome to the program, and thank you to everyone for turning out on what turns out to be a rather sober morning. It's Jewish American Heritage Month, as Suzanne said, and the events of last night, the terrible, tragic shooting at the Capitol Jewish Museum, are, of course, not supposed to be part of Jewish American heritage, but we don't always get the luxury of deciding that. So I just wanted to say before we start this program that our thoughts at Moment, and all of us are with everyone who was impacted by last night's tragic shooting, and with the families of those who were killed, and everyone who's struggling with having experienced and witnessed this event. And there'll be a lot of there'll be content up at the Moment website about this. But Rich, to get back to today, if we don't get to pick exactly what goes into Jewish American heritage, we do get to shape it. And that is what I hope we'll be talking about today. So aside from your brilliant career as a poet, which Suzanne described, and as again, a gallerist and all these other things you do, you're also the author of 20 children's picture books. Some of the lists are 20.
Somewhere.
A lot. It seems like a lot, and many or most from Jewish themes, books about holidays, all the way to more recently the story of the life of Sidney Taylor last year, and most recently the story of Barack Obama and the first White House Seder and how that came to be. And now I hear you've got another book in the works, which is even more brand new. So tell us a little bit about how you've picked your subjects or how they've picked you.
Well, I think, first of all, it's always great to talk to you. It's great to be back and seeing you on screen. And thank you to everyone who is tuning in today or watching this after it is online. I much appreciate it. And I think your question encapsulates the answer is how books pick you. For me, I was a writer. I did not grow up with a Jewish background. I was born into a Jewish family. I did not attend synagogue. I was not bar mitzvahed. I really did not identify very much with Judaism at all. And it really wasn't until as an adult when my lovely Methodist wife found out she was pregnant. That's always an odd thing to say. We were hoping she would be pregnant. Approached me and told me that she had made the decision to convert to Judaism. And against my, I thought she was nuts, actually. And as it turned out, she actually went into labor while in the mikveh, but that's her story to tell.
Wow.
So
Sounds like a
our,
book. Sounds like there's a
yeah,
book in there
yeah,
somewhere.
so our daughter was Jewish by about 15 minutes or so.
Wow.
Um, but
Which one of them was Jewish first, her, the mother or the daughter?
we Jennifer was actually, was during the conversion was set for 2 weeks early when she was in front of the panel of the three male rabbis, and then they were asking her questions. She kept excusing herself to go to the restroom. They would ask me, "Is everything okay?" I said, "Sure." She has the answers written on the bathroom wall. So you ask the question, she goes in, and she's got the answer for you. And then we went to the mikveh, and the three male rabbis and myself. And the female attendant took one look at Jennifer and said, "Are you all Meshuggah? This woman's in labor." The rabbi said, "Dunk and get to the hospital." So, anyways, that's the short
Great
answer.
story.
So, while Jennifer was studying in for the year to become a Jewish person. She was bringing home books, and I started reading as well. I realized very early on I considered myself a somewhat smart person. I knew all about Russian literature. I could name you the kings and queens of England, but I didn't have the slightest idea where my own grandfathers came from. I really didn't know, and and that whole history was foreign to me. So I started reading some of the books she was bringing home, some of the novels and histories. By happenstance, Jennifer was in a class when she was converting of two, the other being the amazing author Julius Lester.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
And for those in your audience who don't know, his book, Love Song Becoming a Jew, I think is one of the best books I've ever read on identity. But pretty much the first time I walked into a synagogue was because Jennifer needed to, you know, was going, and I was told I needed to go with her. And there in the front row was Julius Lester uh, davening in his tallis. And I had known Julius, frankly, as a black militant who had been kicked off of New York City radio for anti-Semitic comments. In fact, not that he made, but that guests on his show made.
Oh.
Um, and uh,
Was that the
and
famous teacher strike, Al Shanker
yes,
period?
that was
Yeah.
exactly then.
We could tell that for the audience, but that's a whole
Yeah,
different program. We'll do it sometime.
Yeah, if you read his book, you'll probably find out about it. But I was curious myself. What's he doing here? And Julius and I became very dear friends. I, in fact, wrote his memoriam for the Hornbook magazine after he passed,
Hmm.
and so I learned a lot from him. And I started studying. And I'm a writer, and when I want to learn something, I learn about it by writing about it.
Mhm.
So my first couple of Jewish themed children's books, I did have previous children's books that I'd written, which were primarily poetry. I had four books which had been illustrated by the wonderful Jewish artist Leonard Baskin, but there was no Jewish content in them. But
This was poetry for children?
just poetry for children, yes.
Mhm.
So I decided that I would learn about my own background. I had, young children. They were doing, both of them were bar and bat mitzvahed. Julius Lester was the cantor at both their ceremonies. Uh, yeah, we had a black cantor and a woman rabbi,
Yeah,
and
for those who don't know, Julius Lester was one of the people who put sort of the whole Jews of color phenomenon on the map. His book and his presence, just the fact that he was both a prominent black figure and a prominent Jewish figure, really, I think, changed the community a lot.
yes.
So,
And also, he was, his first book was titled "Look Out, Whitey, Black Power Gonna Get Your Mama," and who would have thought then he was go on to writing children's books. But he was. My first couple of children's books were about uh, a child who didn't know their grandparents and wanted to learn something about them. Grandpa's Gamble is about a little boy who's thinks his grandfather's the most boring person in the world because all he does is daven and pray all day. And then he hears this amazing backstory that was illustrated by the non-Jewish Barry Mosher. I did a book called Too Young for Yiddish about illustrated by Neil Waldman, about a young boy who doesn't know his grandfather because they speak a different language. He has no interest. And eventually he wants to learn Yiddish so he can talk to his grandfather and learn about him. But the grandfather wants him to be all American and learn about baseball and doesn't want to teach him about the old country. So that, I'm not giving anything away, but towards the end of the book, the grandfather's dying and decides to talk about his life, and that's Too Young for Yiddish.
That was
So,
one of my favorite books of my that my kids had growing up. I didn't connect it to you at all until I got to know you. And it's like, oh,
uh,
that was you. So
well,
very
thank you.
interesting. I'll come back to that because you're doing something interesting with books like that.
We
But
can
go
also
on.
come back to that because I
Yeah.
was fortunate that book led to my deep friendship with Leonard Nimoy.
Ah, Mr.
Leonard was,
Spock.
yes, Leonard was hired to do the audio book of Too Young for Yiddish.
Oh,
So for those who don't know, Leonard Nimoy was a native Yiddish speaker. That was his first language. He started um, out in Yiddish theater. Those were his first roles. Oddly enough, he often played the non-Jewish character in the early plays because people thought he didn't look Jewish, and yet he knew Yiddish. How things change, right?
he's too
Um,
tall, right? Wasn't he 6 foot something?
so
Wow.
Leonard and I had a dear friendship, and that led to later my book, Fascinating, The Life of Leonard Nimoy, which is about how he came up with the live long and prosper based on the old Jewish prayers and his very good his seeing that when he was an 8-year-old boy in Temple. Uh, so those were my first books. After I met Julius, I was also writing for adults. Um, Not part of this conversation, but my father was a victim of gun violence. And
You've written about that a lot in your
wrote about
poetry.
that in my adult
Yeah.
work. Yes. And Julius was the one who came to me and one day and said, uh, considering your history and how you're working to bring blacks and Jews together, this was actually, I think, when Obama was first running for president. I had Jews were abandoning him at one point after his preacher had said some anti-Semitic thing, and I had written about encouraging Jews to stay with him. But I had written earlier things. My neighborhood when I was born was primarily Jewish, but
Where was that? What?
East New York, Brooklyn.
Okay, Brooklyn. Yeah.
It turned, by the time we left, it was almost all black. We were one of the very few white families. Um, so Julius suggested that I should be writing children's books about, trying to heal those rifts
Mm.
between blacks and Jews. When I was writing about my own history, my book Across the Alley, which is really kind of a disguised biography as well.
That's a
Uh,
children's book?
that's a children's book, and it's
Okay.
about a little Jewish boy and a little black boy. Nowadays, I have to say it's about little Jewish boy and a white-skinned little Jewish boy and a Christian black-skinned boy. Because, frankly, when I wrote it, I really didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have the knowledge of the size of the Black Jewish population and how prominent it was. So it really, when I wrote it, it was about my life in segregation at the point where the neighborhood was half Black, half Jewish. We weren't supposed to play with them. They weren't supposed to play with us.
Hmm.
And then
When is this roughly? 60s,
uh,
50s,
yeah, so this is the 50s,
50s? Okay.
early
Yeah.
50s. I'm getting old. Um,
Same here.
and,
Yeah. A lot can happen in
uh,
60,
so
70 years. Yeah.
there was a little Black child and a little Jewish child who weren't allowed to play with each other, but their bedroom windows faced each other's, and they became best friends at night. And then the book is about whether they're going to bring their friendship out into the open.
Huh.
While I was writing that, um, I was trying to think of, real life situations of Blacks and Jews being friendly. And that led to what probably is my best known, at this point, children's book, As Good as Anybody, about the friendship of Martin Luther King Jr. and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel,
Right.
who famously marched arm in arm. And in fact, Julius Lester did the audio book of that.
Was that
Uh,
his idea for you to write that book, or was
no, it came about after my Across the Alley, where I realized. Um, so the nice thing about writing children's books often, or the nice thing about writing books, is even if they're based in your own biography, you can give yourself different endings, different relationships
mm-hmm.
than you might have had in real life.
Hmm.
So that I could give myself a relationship with my grandfather that I never had. Uh,
Oh,
that
like
I
in the
really
Yiddish book.
right that
Yeah.
I really frankly didn't want as a child or even think about.
Hmm.
And I was so far into his, and especially when I married outside the religion. It,
Although, as so
so
often happens, it was your door back in, right?
it was my door back in, but
Yeah.
it was hard for at that point for it to be seen as that.
Right.
So I gave myself a relationship with my grandfather in my book that I didn't have.
Hmm.
Uh, in Across the Alley, again, I hope I'm not giving away anything. At the end, the boys become friends and take their friendship out into the open. Something I was too cowardly to do as a child.
But you did have this friend through the window. That how it was
Right.
true?
Yes.
Huh. Interesting.
So I was able to again give myself that friendship, and then I started thinking about why, as a child, um, was I uh, cowardly? As children, you know what's right and wrong. Often, when I go into schools and talk, you'll see there's some kid in the class who's getting picked on in general. Um, and most of the kids who are picking on that child know it's wrong.
Mm.
And most of them don't even want to participate, but they're afraid if they don't, that they'll get picked on, right?
Hmm. You can
So,
see all that. You come in as the adult, the outsider, and you've experienced. You
right.
can just read it, right?
So when I talk to children, I'll often say, why didn't I have the ability to speak out? Because if I had spoken out, then maybe the next child would have said, "Oh, yeah, too," and then maybe one more. And that is, in fact, how when Heschel and King marched,
Mm.
they marched through the streets. At the beginning, it was a very, very small group of people. But as they walked, from one town to another, one by one, people started joining.
Hmm.
So by the time they got to where they were going, you had a huge number, and that's what created the movement that made the change. So
Hmm.
I try to explain to children that, we can't make the changes that we often want.
Hmm.
Even though I'm writing about people who were, fairly, enacted change, they all needed help. They all needed other voices. They all had shoulders to stand on.
Hmm.
So, so when I was writing Across the Alley, I started to think, well, uh, who, how do you get this courage? How does somebody like Martin Luther King have the courage to, hold his hand out? And then how does somebody like Abraham Joshua Heschel have the courage to take his hand and together move forward? Now they're two great icons. But when their march from Selma to Montgomery originally happened, most of the Jewish community was very much against Heschel marching.
Oh,
Uh,
really? Hmm.
yes, they felt we've got enough of the problems of our own. Why, you should be on the bema, not in the street. And then Heschel, of course, famously said, I felt like my legs were praying as he's marching through the street.
Hmm.
Uh, but that was not a popular opinion at the time. And he was roundly, um, you know, uh, attacked for it. And King also, would take unpopular positions against the Vietnam War, many things. So when I was writing Across the Alley, I wanted to think, well, uh, how does this happen? How does this transformation happen? So I wrote about King and Heschel as young children, and I also wanted to, you know, I didn't want them to be saints because they weren't. They were kids. I think the first line of As Good as Anybody is Martin was mad. And they'd get in arguments, this and that. But little by little, they enact change.
Hmm.
And so now I totally forgot how I got on this
So
subject.
I will. I'll get you back to it, but just to follow up on that a little bit. When you go with these stories into, say, I take it you go into schools and you read to kids. Do they get that? I mean, how do they respond to stories like
Oh,
this?
I think they get it very much so. So I often write about difficult issues for children.
Hmm.
I write about race issues. I've written about busing. I've written about people who are not, well, my book, which we'll get to, maybe The Language of Angels with Eliezer Ben Yehuda. That's a figure who today, frankly, I would arrest for child abuse. Yet
It's the
he,
head. This is the founder of modern Hebrew, right? Who
yes.
wouldn't let his child speak anything but Hebrew. And
Yes.
yeah,
And basically raised his child with no, he wouldn't allow him to hear anything but Hebrew, which meant that nobody else spoke Hebrew where he was. So he had no friends. He wouldn't even allow him to have animals because he wanted him only to hear the language of, what he called the language of the angels.
right.
So but so sometimes people will say to me, isn't it a little young to introduce kids to some of these issues? And I wonder if these people that were ever children or remembered when they were children. Uh,
Hmm.
Kids are terribly sophisticated, in negotiating a school day. Exactly, if somebody's getting picked on, they understand. They want to do something right. They don't know how to, but they also want to fit in. Um, a day for children, every day in school can be, a huge um,
Sure.
interior difficulty, also wonder. Kids early on are very aware of what's going on around them. What they often lack is the language to talk about it.
Hmm. Sure. So are
That's
there,
where I
yeah.
come in.
Hmm. And you're giving them that with the book. So are
I'm
there like
giving them that.
amazing things kids have said to you about your books? Things that really stay with you or resonate?
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, children are like philosophers. When I ask for questions, I mean, you get the usual questions: How old are you? How much money do you make? And are you famous? Uh, you know, but I'm always amazed. at how quickly children pick up on the themes of the books, how they will often discuss. Sometimes they come up to me afterwards, um, by themselves. That they don't want to talk out in front of the class, and they talk about an issue that they've had in the class where they were afraid to speak out, and they knew they should, and they promised me next time they will stand up. Uh,
Oh.
Sometimes, they'll write their own stories about their thing. So yeah, I find it's gratifying to give them the language. It's also a lot of my books are read to them by parents and teachers, and it gives adults a way to talk to the kids about things that adults are maybe sometimes uncomfortable talking
Hmm.
about in
Well, that's yeah. And your age group is your age range is sort of, I'm thinking of it's kind of 5 to 8, sort of
so
a little younger maybe.
yeah, no, a little older maybe. So one of the things that one of my pet peeves in life is how quickly parents uh, want to get their children off of picture books into, middle grade
Chapter
novels.
books, yeah, that they can read
Um,
to themselves.
you
Yeah.
know, and then kids get the message that picture books are babyish.
Hmm.
I think we should be reading picture books our whole lives. And I love picture books. Even now, if I want to learn about a subject, often the first thing I do is I find a good picture book. Because if the author has done their job, they have taken this huge subject and narrowed it down to its essence
Hmm.
for kids. And that gives me an overview. It lets me know if I want to study further, and it lets me know what I don't know and where to go to learn more if I need to. And the other, I think, guilty secret is that how many adults come to me and say, "Oh, I'm so glad I have a child because it gave me an opportunity to read your books, and I've learned so much. And I really loved your book." When I go into older grades, I speak at middle schools and high school, um, and I give the kids permission to talk about their favorite books, often by saying, if you were writing a picture book for your younger sibling or something, what would it be about? And then I start hearing about all these books they love and the picture books and their favorite illustrators. So when I write a book, I do not have an age range in mind at all. I'm writing a book for everyone. And I think there are good adult books that would not interest children, but I don't think a, a good child, I don't think that anything exists like a good children's book that does not also interest adults.
Huh. Well, we have one full-throated approval of this in the comments already. Someone said, "Yes to reading picture books our whole lives. Thank you for saying it." So ordinarily I wouldn't go to the comments, but that fits right in. There's a lot of
When I'm asked to come to schools, I most often asked to speak to third and fourth graders. So
uh-huh.
I assume that that's kind of a sweet spot. It's often also where they're first tackling some of the issues that bring out in the majority of my books. I also write for older kids and for younger kids, but most of my Jewish themed books tend to fall within that general age range, 6 to 10. But when I'm out speaking, it's usually to families. Just to mention my other books, um, Lipman Pike, America's First Home Run King, is about the very first Jewish superstar baseball player. Also, the very first, in fact, baseball superstar, the first professional ball player,
Wait, what's
uh,
his name? Litman?
Lipman Pike.
News
Uh,
to me. Wow.
and he's news to almost everyone. Played in the 1870s, and he was left out of the history books on purpose
Because he was Jewish?
because he was Jewish.
Wow.
Because when Spalding, I mean, life doesn't change. when, and this is not necessarily in the book, but the back history is, the book is about him as a famous baseball player. But the back history is that when Spalding Sporting Goods was trying to pitch baseball as an all-American game,
Hmm.
which it wasn't, and they made up out of whole cloth Cooperstown, and they made up, the whole baseball origination story. That didn't exist. That's purely fiction. But they wanted, it to be an all-American game. And a
Hmm.
Jew did not fit
Right.
with their vision of all-American game. So
Huh.
Lipman Pike, who was the first professional first ball player paid to play, the reason we had a professional league was left out of the thing. So that's a book. The reason I got on it is that when I talk, go into synagogues or conferences, it's usually parents think, okay, they're going to bring their kid to it. And then by the end of my talk, it's like all the adults have come,
Right.
and and totally outnumber the kids,
Right.
because it's a subject that I think is interesting, that people don't know about,
Hmm.
and it's for everyone, and that's what I aim to do in my books in general. One weapon then leads to the next.
Right, right. So we'll get to the more recent books in a minute. I mean, I know we want to talk about the Obama book and the Maimonides book and the new book. Um, but I just want to just to loop back a little bit to the theme. Um, so like Jewish American heritage, it's out there, but also it's something you're making, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of influence. I mean, do you have there's a certain amount of power there. You're telling kids, what they should take from, what's in their heritage. You're really helping. So, how do you think about that? I mean, do you have a philosophy of because
So for one thing, for me, it feels totally odd to be the person doing that because as a child, I did not have that.
right.
I did not know most of that. And even at the beginning when I was writing my books, I did not think of myself primarily as a Jewish author. I was just writing really about my own background and my own history. Somehow, in that middle time, I started to be invited to synagogues. I started to be known as a Jewish writer. And then I was approached by a publisher to do exactly what you just asked, to write a book for children, to teach them about all of Judaism. They wanted an alphabet book for young readers, uh,
Uh-huh.
where I would have a letter, and each letter would be something important in the Jewish history, and or the Jewish religion, so that a young child can know, well, what's all this about? What does being a Jew mean? What do I need to learn to be a Jew?
That's so
And
interesting to do it as an alphabet. That's so Jewish. That's so traditional.
so they approached me, and at first I turned them down,
Uh,
because I said I can't think of anybody less qualified than myself because I just don't know this stuff.
mm.
Then I was having dinner with Leonard Nimoy, and
All stories come back to Mr. Spock.
because of the previous book, and Leonard was very steeped in his Judaism, and we were just talking about our day, and he asked, what I did today. I said, well, I turned down a book, a Jewish alphabet book, that will be used in day schools all around the country. And he said to me, Rich, when I'm trying to decide whether to take an acting job or not, the first thing I ask myself is, does it scare me? And if it scares me, then I know that I want to do it.
Hmm.
If it's something that I know about or I've done before, why waste my time? And he said, in fact, I think you are the absolute perfect person to write this book because of the fact that you did not grow up steeped in it. You didn't grow up in a religious household. He said to me, and I still remember, he said, you can't ask a fish to explain the water. You have to be standing on dry ground.
Hmm.
And you have curiosity and you have interest. And you are going to have the exact same questions that a child will. Well, why be Jewish? What's it all about? So the questions that you have are exactly what they're looking for.
Uh,
So I
wow.
excused myself and said, "Let me call my my agent.
We call
Uh,
your agent back.
did they hire anybody yet? I want to do it. I want to do it." And
Boy,
then
that's a great
uh,
story.
it took forever because there's so much. And how do you choose, the 26 things to focus on? So I wanted to make sure this, in fact, was how I learned about Lipman Pike.
Ah,
Because at one point, I think, and it didn't end up this way. It was going to be K is for Sandy Koufax. And then I was going to have a sidebar where I talked about Jewish sports in general.
so this
Each
isn't a board book. This is a book with some
uh,
real
it,
stuff.
it's a picture book, so each letter has like a little 4-line poem for very
Uh,
young kids. And then there's a sidebar for older children and adults where I expand on the thing. So, when I'm studying Sandy Koufax, trying to say, well, I need to know everything about Jews in baseball, Jew in football, this basketball. And who's this Lipman Pike? I asked some friends of mine who were baseball fanatics. I was not. Nobody had heard of him. So, well, I have to write a book about that. And that led to that. And and then many of other books came about because something interested me when I was researching it, but it didn't fit into the alphabet book.
uh,
So you know what? I'm going to write a whole nother book about just this subject.
is your alphabet book still in print?
Yeah, it is. I think it was a PJ Library. Um, it was a PJ Library selection, and it was actually an association of Jewish libraries. It was their silver Sidney Taylor Award winner.
What's it
And
called?
A is for Abraham, a Jewish family alphabet.
There you go.
And the same year, now I can brag, uh, as good as anybody, Martin Luther King and Abraham Joshua Heschel won the gold medal, and it was the first time in the history of the Association of Jewish Libraries that one author had won both the gold and silver medal. Thank you very much. I was pleased to do it.
Also tough. No, that's great. I mean, and I can see why those sound like great. Those are great books. I think Suzanne put the link for everyone. The link to I think a list of your books is in the
Right.
chat.
And people can
So
go to my site too if they want autograph copies. It's richardmichelson.com. We'll do the commercial thing right now.
easy to remember. We won't do it at the end. So and then you went from there. You won these Sidney Taylor Awards, and then you wrote a book about her, right? Sidney Taylor? Or is
So,
there more in between?
when I wrote my book, The Language of Angels, about, and I'll do this one quickly. Um, when I was working on Too Young for Yiddish, the illustrator Neil Waldman, we were having a conversation about, very briefly, Isaac Bashevis Singer, who said that Yiddish was a language that did not have a wide vocabulary for weapons.
Oh,
And we're talking about whether language creates the culture or culture creates the language. If you have all sorts of words for various weapons, is that going to make the society more militaristic? Or is it a militaristic society gets, anyways, I don't even remember where we came down on it.
it's
But
the
that's
Eskimos thing with snow.
he started, Neil, who speaks both Yiddish and Hebrew, started comparing the two. And he said to me he was planning on writing a book about Eliezer ben Yehuda, who basically reinvented Hebrew for modern age,
Hmm.
It had not been used outside of prayer or the Lubavitcher communities on a day-to-day basis. So most of what happened in 2000 years, there were no Hebrew words for ice cream, library. He had to invent all that. And in his lifetime, he did. It's absolutely amazing. It's like somebody going to Italy today and say, within my lifetime, I want everybody to speak, Latin. But Mail said that he had difficulty writing about him, and he gave me the idea as a gift. And I
Oh,
said, thank you very much. And then I studied about him and I said, there's no way in the world this is a children's book. He was a difficult person. He was a nasty person. He did amazing things. But there was no way that I could think of to do it. After my book on Leonard Nimoy, which came about because I was writing so many biographies about famous Jewish people. And I knew everything about Leonard because, we traveled for a couple of years together and we would talk about his background, my background. It never occurred to me to write a book about him
mm,
so attached to his Judaism until he was very ill at the end. And I said, well, this is exactly who. So I wrote my book, Fascinating. He read it just before he died. In
mm,
fact, at the very last conversation, we had a book tour lined up. And I said, Leonard, you have to get well because we have a book tour. And he said, don't worry, Rich, I'll be there with you. Uh,
uh,
and unfortunately, he died before that. But in fact, I did the book tour and I felt his presence very much with me.
mm.
But then, to circle this back quickly, I went to my very first ever Trek convention. Star Trek was like the one thing Leonard and I never spoke about. But I had a book now to sell, right? So I went to a Trek convention to sell my book, Fascinating. And somebody came up to me and they had a young child who was maybe 3 or 4, and the child started talking to me in Klingon.
Yes, of course.
And I looked at this fella, and the kid didn't speak English. And I said, so is he going to be the very first native Klingon speaker? And right then and there, I literally had not thought about Eliezer Ben Yehuda for 15 years.
Ah,
All of a sudden the book just formed in my mind, the very first native English speaker. So, so I
there you
wrote
go.
that book. I got my second Sidney Taylor Gold Medal. Thank you very much. And when I went to the ceremony uh, to to get my award, Sidney Taylor's daughter just happened to be there, and
Sydney Taylor, author of the All of a Kind family books,
all
for
the
anyone who
time,
hasn't made
thank
the
you.
connection.
And Joe Taylor Marshall was there, and we went to lunch. And she started telling me about her mom. And I knew about the books, but I had no idea that her mom had been an actress off Broadway, had been with the original Martha Graham Dance Company. By the time that lunch was over, I was already in my mind writing my book, One of a Kind: A Life of Sidney Taylor. So what happens? One book leads to another, um, and uh, and so that book came out, and now we're almost at modern time, contemporary times.
Right. I talk a little bit about the Obama book, and then we have some interesting questions in the chat. But I do want to hear you talk about the Obama book, and particularly about, again, like for children, like for all of us, Obama's kind of a recent memory, or people maybe still have strong feelings about him. Um, but for kids, it's almost,
Right.
I mean, it might as well have happened in ancient Egypt, right? So you're coming in to with almost a blank slate. So tell us the story about the book.
So that book came about not because of me. I was commissioned to write that book.
Ah, that's an unusual thing, or
That's an unusual thing. It's happened to me a few times. A is for Abraham was a similar
right?
thing that came to me. But PJ Library.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope all your listeners know PJ Library. They're absolutely wonderful. It was started by the philanthropist Harold Grinspoon, who gives away free Jewish books to kids. And in fact, I'm having dinner with Harold tonight. He's doing a little party for the book, and I look forward to that. But Harold was good friends with Eric Lesser, who was a Massachusetts state senator and was Obama's baggage carrier during his very first run for presidency. And Eric would, I mean, literally carry the baggage from hotel to hotel. It was the first time Eric was not, he was on the road with Obama for a year. It was the first time he would not be home in time to celebrate Passover with his family. Um, and so he and two other, the youngest aides,
This is
went
in the first campaign
in the first campaign,
in '08. Yeah.
2008, decided the three of them would celebrate Passover in the basement of the hotel they were at. And they were starting when there came a knock at the door. No, it was not Elijah. It was the president who
Or the prospective president, the candidate.
the candidate at the time who said, "Is this the Seder? Can I join?" And this was a time when Obama's approval rating among Jews was terrible because of Jeremiah Wright controversy. There was no press there. This is a measure of the man. He did not go into the Seder to curry favor with Jews. He did it because he was a decent human being who wanted to support the youngest members of his staff. At the end of the Seder, everybody held up their glass. They said, "Next year in Jerusalem." Obama held up his. He said, "Next year in the White House." That's the title of the book. It talks about how it came to be. The next year, he was in the White House. Who would have believed it? No one. And he again approached Eric Lesser, who was working for David Axelrod at the time, and said, "Hey, Lesser, are we doing Passover again?" And Lesser said, "I don't know, sir, are we?" And he did. It was the first ever in history Passover celebrated in the White House. He did it for all 8 years, and he invited the people who were with him. It was not, again, a big public thing. The people who had been with him in his campaign and their family. It was a private thing, and it was an amazing thing. So Harold asked me if I would be willing to write the book, and I did, and how wonderful it has become.
And it's been it's are you what how do kids what do kids take from this book? It is a charming, charming book, by the way. I love I for some reason I heard the story, when you've done it in person, and I heard it at the time, but that page where he knocks on the door and he sticks his head in and says, "Hey, is this a Seder? Can I come in?" That is just for some reason that's just very it's just a very charming it's a nice story.
Thank you.
Um, um,
So for kids, for kids, it's history. I mean, and it really is, but it's like, we teach kids Jewish history. This is Jewish history. It happens to be recent Jewish history. And the fact that, again, it's, as we say, the descendants of two enslaved people celebrating Passover in the most important house in the country is really an important moment in American history. I don't want to get into current events, but it was a very important moment in American history. It was important in Jewish history, and it was important for so many of the civil rights leaders who the story of the biblical Exodus really formed their own beliefs.
mhm.
People like Martin Luther King Jr. and everyone. So I think it's for kids. I want them to know that again, reach out to people who might not look like you, might not think like you, find a commonality. It's just mostly, my books, I hope, are good lessons, but nobody cares about a lesson. Everybody cares about a good story. It's
Mhm.
got to be funny. It's got to have a dog in it. And it has, and you want to have to turn the page and see what happens next. The other stuff, is great, but the story is paramount.
Well, Rich, I could talk, I mean, I could ask you questions for hours. That's a lovely note to end on. Suzanne has some questions from the chat and also some others that she's accumulated other ways. So let me just thank you and urge everyone to read these, buy and read these lovely books. We didn't even get to the book about Maimonides, which,
Yeah, you have me back. We can do a whole hour on Maimonides.
and
Let me tell people if the book is called More Than Enough, and it's based on Maimonides' Ladder of Giving. And again, it's a perfect way for parents to talk to their children about when they walk down the street, they see various people begging, asking for money. They know that there are poor people and rich people. This is a story to start that conversation among parents and children, among children. How do we interact with people who have less than we do? How do we help to make the world a better place? So let me tell people to please look for that book as well.
all yet more Jewish American heritage.
Yes,
Thank you so much. On that note, back to you, Suzanne, and thank you, Rich. I'll hope to see you soon.
pleasure.
Great. Thank you for both of you for that wonderful conversation. Question about banning of books. We've heard a lot of books being banned in schools over the last few years. What are your thoughts on that? And is there a concern that some of your books could hit the banned list being in public schools, especially since they're for younger children?
Yeah, so my thoughts on that is it's absolutely terrible, as you might expect. You know, parents have the right to, um, of what their own children are going to read, but they don't have the right to tell other parents what their children can read. And kids need books, again, to start conversations about difficult subjects. This is how you teach your children. Even if there's a book that you don't agree with, read it to your kids and tell them why you don't agree with it. Because they are going to come across people with different ideas. And if they're shielded from those ideas or from what you think about those ideas as their parent, they're not going to know how to respond, how to answer. So the banning of books, I think, is just, I can't believe that we're moving in that direction. Yeah, so I've had, I mean, certainly my Obama book, because it's frequent and in the current political conversation, it's difficult. I have gotten hate mail from Jews who have sworn to me that Obama was behind the October 7th massacre and he funded it personally. I mean, it's just crazy. And in fact, on my Facebook page, I answered one of those letters a long time ago. You're going to have to scroll back a little bit. And certainly, uh, I understand that not everybody's an Obama fan. But again, people have attacked that book because of Obama. Uh, but the book really isn't about that. The book is American history. The book is how did the Seder get to be celebrated in the White House? And how can people come together? It is not, there's no political ideas bandied forth in that book. I have my own political ideas. You can guess what they are. But we need to know American history. So what's going on now is just a travesty.
Just parenthetically, several years ago, I think when Obama was still in the White House, I met a woman at a party in Washington, a person, and when I told her there were satyrs in the White House, she absolutely, not only did she not know about them, but she absolutely categorically refused to believe any such thing. Nope, I know that can't be true. You're lying to me. You know,
No, it's
So let's talk a little bit about the illustrations because they're very important to your books. How do
yes.
you choose the right illustrator? And do you have any say in the pictures, or that's a completely separate
So,
piece of the
so what
book?
most people don't understand is that, first of all, I have no say whatsoever. And I sell my manuscript to a publisher. They now own it. They can do whatever they want with it. Now, I'm in a little different position than most people in the world because I also have a day job. I'm an art dealer You see my gallery behind me. And I represent very many of the premier illustrators in the country. That still does not give me the right to choose an illustrator. The publisher does. They'll often turn down my suggestion. I also will never ask one of my illustrators to illustrate one of my books because that puts them in an awkward position. I'm writing them checks because I'm selling their work. If they don't love the book, they don't want to tell me that. So I would not approach one of my illustrators. As it happens, because my books are illustrated by many of the best illustrators in the country, sometimes a relationship forms, and then I will later represent that artist. In the case of Raul Colon, As Good as Anybody, I met him when he did that book, and then now I'm handling his work. Uh, just as an art dealer, I handle Leonard Nimoy's photography. My Obama book is illustrated by E.B. Lewis. It's our third book together. And
Here,
that is,
like
thank you.
that.
He did an amazing job. And that is one of the few times where I did suggest the illustrator because PJ Library had our book Across the Alley, which I mentioned, they were giving it away. And I knew that they loved what EB did for that book. They wanted a black illustrator because it's about the blacks and Jews. So I suggested it, but they had to approve. And in this case, they did. There were other people they were shooting around, thinking of. And it's just amazing to see your work come to life.
Mhm.
But I
I
don't
know,
choose
I
it.
I know it's time to wrap, but I want to see if I can quickly sneak in two more questions. Someone wanted to know if you had any thoughts about writing a children's book about the U.S. and the Holocaust, and then also wondering, are there other people that you have always wanted to profile or topics that you're hoping to do one day?
Okay, so the first question first, I write about the Holocaust very much in my adult work. It's regularly in there. I touch on it in some of my children's books. Um, Sometimes, As Good as Anybody does talk about Heschel's escape from to this country from the Holocaust. Across the Alley does talk about their parents. So I don't avoid it, and I think it's an important subject for children as well. And I do have some manuscripts that more directly, focus on it. Just nothing that I've published so far. Are there other people I want to do? So I have basically, I keep a list. I actually have a list that's probably got 100 topics that I want to do. I'm not going to live long enough. I'm starting to say I better work faster. Every time I have tons of ideas. Kids say, "Where do you get your ideas?" Ideas are everywhere. Every time I read the newspaper, I come up with two ideas. Oh, I want to know more about this person. I want to know more about that person. I jot it down, and then I try to find the time to do it. Sometimes it works. I have a book coming out this fall called Fanny's Big Idea, and I'll do this quickly, which is it's the 100th anniversary of the Jewish Book Council and Jewish Book Month, which was Jewish Book Week, was started by the first Jewish librarian, Fanny Goldstein. She was on my list for years, just never got around to it. And then suddenly the Jewish Book Council said, "Hey, it's our 100th anniversary coming up. Could you write a book about her?" I moved it to the top of the list, and I did. That'll be out. I also have a biography coming out in October on Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis. And God, I wish he was on the court today. But again, current events, what's happening to the court, I moved him up on the list because I wanted, it was so important to talk about a time when the Supreme Court was not politicized in the way it is today and where, um, well, they were making the right decisions.
So as we wrap up, you answered this a little bit in this last answer, but what advice do you have for people who are interested in writing children's books, finding agents, finding publishers, any other advice you have for those who'd like to write?
Sure. The most important thing is read children's books. I mean, there's tons of them out there. Find ones you like. It's amazing to me how many people come up to me and say they've written a children's book. Where do they get it published? And they have absolutely no idea about the industry of children's books. They've never heard of Maurice Sendak. They've never heard of, Jerry Pinkney. They've not, I don't want to shame people, but if you want to be part of an industry, you need to know what's going on now, and you need to read widely and see what works for you, what doesn't work for you, whose work you love, what you think you can do better on. You need to read widely. As far as finding publishers, etc., there's a wonderful organization called SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, that you can join. It's for new writers and illustrators, longtime artists and illustrators, and they answer exactly those questions. They have publications. Who are the agents? What publishers are looking for what topics? Jewish books, PJ Library. PJ Library is your greatest resource. They publish lists of topics that they're looking for. They have their own publishing arm. They're absolutely, read all the PJ Library books because those are the ones that they're choosing. They haven't chosen all my books, but I think they have 5 or 6 of them, and hopefully they'll have some of the new ones. I'll ask them tonight. But involve yourself. It's like anything. Meet people. We do an annual illustrator show at my gallery every November. Sign up for our mailing list. Come, and editors and publishers show up, and it's a way to schmooze with people on just a casual basis. You get to know them, they know their name, and we're happy to have you. And plus, it's fun. A lot of our illustrators are there. You get to meet your heroes in the book industry. It's a wonderful industry, but yeah, it's difficult like everything. There are more writers than there are books that can be published.
Great. Well, again, thank you, Amy. Thank you, Rich, for this really, really wonderful conversation. It's a great way to honor Jewish American Heritage Month. As Amy said, I did put a link to Rich's website and all of his books in the chat. We will do a follow-up email that will also include the link, and encourage you to share this program today with others. Again, thank you for joining us. Go to momentmag.com where you can sign up for our upcoming programs. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye bye now.
Bye.